Andreas Münzer built a multi-million-dollar bodybuilding empire on a body that was quietly dying from the inside out. This is the story of the man whose 3% body fat physique turned him into a legend and a medical horror story. How Andreas Münzer built a $3 million empire at 3% body fat. Then, his organs shut down. On stage, imagine a body that looks like an anatomy chart come to life. Judges and photographers said Andreas' skin looked like plastic wrap, pulled tight over every muscle fiber. Veins like cables, striations across every muscle group, even in places where most pros still had a little softness. While other bodybuilders would get shredded for a few weeks a year, Andreas lived there almost permanently. He hovered at frighteningly low body fat year-round, constantly flirting with the line between elite conditioning and organ failure. But to understand how he got there and why his story is still talked about decades later, you have to rewind to where it started. Andreas Münzer was born in 1964 in a small Austrian town, far from the bright lights of the Olympia stage. Growing up, he idolized another Austrian who'd done the impossible, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Old magazine photos of Arnold weren't just inspiration. For Andreas, they were a roadmap out of a normal life. While most kids saw a movie star, Andreas saw a blueprint. Train harder than anyone, diet stricter than anyone, sacrifice more than anyone, and the world will pay attention. He started in small local gyms, lifting with a level of focus that made other lifters uncomfortable. People said he wasn't the biggest guy in the room, but he was always the last one to leave. No skipped sets, no skipped cardio, no off-season. That mentality, no off-switch, no compromise, was the same mindset that would later make him famous, and then kill him. By his late teens and early 20s, Andreas started competing in local shows, and the results came quickly. He rose through the amateur ranks in Europe and began placing well at major amateur championships. The message was clear. He was good, but not untouchable. His shape and symmetry were solid, his presentation strong. But there was one thing that made him unforgettable: conditioning. While other guys came in lean, Andreas came in peeled. His skin was paper thin, his muscles were dry and full, and his definition was freakish for the era. He quickly built a reputation as the guy who would show up on stage with body fat, so low photographers didn't have to retouch the photos, because there was literally nothing to smooth out. Every line, every fiber, every vein was already there. As prize money, sponsorships, guest posing, and seminars started to roll in, Andreas began quietly building something people don't usually associate with bodybuilders: a real financial base. Between contest checks, appearance fees, endorsements, and business moves tied to his name and image, he wasn't just living show to show. He was turning his physique into a brand. In today's terms, when you add up peak-era pro bodybuilding income, appearance value, and the kind of long-tail influence his name still has, you're looking at a man whose career easily translated into multi-million-dollar potential. His entire value proposition was simple: nobody is leaner than Andreas Münzer. That one extreme selling point powered an entire career. Promoters wanted him on stage because his look sold tickets. Magazines wanted him on covers because his photos grabbed attention. Fans wanted to see him in person to believe that level of detail was even real. Here's where the first twist hits. That empire was built on a look that wasn't just extreme, it was medically unsustainable. By the early 90s, Andreas was no longer just a promising European. He was standing on some of the biggest stages in the world, placing well in legendary lineups. He battled at the Arnold Classic, he stood under the Olympia lights, and even when he didn't win, people left the venue talking about him. In photos, he often made bigger, more genetically gifted guys fade into the background because the eye always shot straight to the guy with the freaky detail. Magazines loved it. Fans loved it. Promoters loved it. He was photogenic in a very specific way. Every angle showed insane detail, which sells. And once that happened, the market did what it always does. It rewarded the extreme. The more shredded he got, the more he was talked about. The more he was talked about, the more money and opportunities came in. But that created a trap. In bodybuilding, what gets rewarded on stage quickly becomes the new standard. Andreas wasn't just competing, he was moving the goalposts. Suddenly, to keep his status and his income, he couldn't show up at normal pro conditioning. He had to show up as Andreas Münzer, the conditioning benchmark. That meant one brutal rule: no real off-season. Most pros would bulk up, gain some fat, let their bodies recover, and then diet down before shows. Andreas basically lived in prep mode. Low calories, low body fat, heavy training, cardio, and brutal discipline. And under all of that, the thing the posters never showed: an aggressive, non-stop drug regimen. Behind the magazine covers was a stack that sounded less like a fitness plan and more like a pharmacy inventory. Anabolic steroids for muscle mass, oral steroids that pounded the liver, growth hormone and other hormones to shape his look, thyroid medication to keep his metabolism on overdrive, insulin and other compounds to manipulate the way his body used nutrients. And then the real killers in this story: diuretics. Diuretics strip water out of the body. For a bodybuilder, that means dry, grainy muscles, sharper lines, and veins that look like they're carved into the skin. For your organs, it can mean dehydration so severe that blood pressure drops, kidneys struggle to filter blood, and your heart is forced to pump thicker, more concentrated blood. In the short term, that makes for insane stage photos. In the long term, it's like running your internal organs on sand instead of oil. That's the hidden cost of looking dry on stage. Every time he dialed in for a show, he wasn't just losing water under the skin. He was stressing the structures that kept him alive. Combine that with chronically low body fat and almost no off-season recovery, and his body was never bouncing back. It was just accumulating damage. From the outside, the story still looked like a win. He was collecting solid placings, traveling, guest posing, and building his name. He had status in the sport, an instantly recognizable look, and an income stream built around his unique selling point. You could make a very real case that his conditioning alone powered a career worth millions over time. But inside, something else was happening. Friends and observers described Andreas dealing with ongoing stomach issues and pain in the months leading up to his death. Not just the usual hunger and discomfort of a cutting phase, but real sharp pain. The kind you can't just tough out without consequences. Still, he kept pushing, kept competing, kept chasing the next stage and the next paycheck. The same all-in mindset that fueled his rise now blinded him to the warning signs. In early 1996, he stepped on stage at the Arnold Classic in Columbus. Once again, he brought the look everyone expected from him. Skin thin, dry, sliced to the bone. He placed respectably in a stacked lineup. A few days later, he flew to another show and competed again, once more pushing his body through the same dehydration, drug manipulation, and stress. 2 major shows, back-to-back, at a level of leanness and dryness that the human body simply isn't designed to maintain. On his resume, it looked like just another set of contests checked off the list. Inside his body, it was the last straw. Back in Europe, he woke up one morning with severe abdominal pain and finally went to the hospital. Doctors found internal bleeding in his stomach and signs that his organs were under massive stress. His blood pressure was low. His body was struggling to keep up. They decided to operate to try to control the bleeding and save his life. They were too late. Within days, his liver and kidneys began to fail. An enlarged, overworked heart, a battered liver from years of steroids and orals, kidneys destroyed by constant dehydration and toxic load. Everything started shutting down. At just 31 years old, Andreas Münzer died from multiple organ failure. And then came the part that would turn his death into something more than a tragedy. It became a case study. When doctors performed the autopsy, they expected to see a very muscular man, but what they found shocked even experienced professionals. Externally, he looked like the perfect bodybuilding poster. Thick muscle, dry, grainy definition, almost no visible fat. Internally, his body told a different story. His liver was heavily damaged, with tumor-like growths in areas that were described as crumbly and abnormal. Years of heavy steroid use and toxic orals had taken their toll. His heart was significantly enlarged compared to a normal, healthy adult male heart, a classic sign of chronic stress and drug-induced hypertrophy. His kidneys showed serious damage consistent with long-term dehydration and chemical strain. And then there was the fat, more accurately, the absence of it. The autopsy noted an almost total lack of subcutaneous fat. That's the thin layer of fat under your skin that acts as both an energy reserve and a protective cushion. Body fat isn't just aesthetic fluff. It's part of your survival system. It protects organs, stabilizes hormones, supports immune function, and keeps your body from falling apart under stress. Andreas had pushed his levels so low for so long that when a crisis hit, massive internal bleeding, organs under strain, he had no buffer left, no reserves, no safety net. And this is where the story gets truly dark. The exact thing that made him famous, the reason promoters called him, the reason magazines featured him, the reason fans still post his pictures today. That razor-sharp 3% looking physique was the same thing that helped destroy his organs. If you found this breakdown eye-opening and you want more stories that go beyond the highlight reels and into the real cost behind legendary physiques and fortunes, make sure you subscribe, hit like, and tell me in the comments whose story you want me to expose next.